I do not like Siege's balancing recently, and it's for a different reason than I used to not like their balancing. Now, I know this video is going to inherently sound a bit ungrateful. There's no way I can say that without sounding ungrateful. So I want to preface, I like the cadence we have ever since we got the new creative director. I like the direction we've been taking in with the more constant balancing updates and the emphasis on buffing operators. I want to make it extremely clear that I think that is a great thing. And if you've seen my videos, I've been banging on about how much I love that. However, my main issue with the balancing recently isn't the lack of balancing, it's more the fact that I feel like they've just not been balancing the game around the meta itself. Rather, many of the operators who have been getting buffs, such as Gridlock, Scopos, and Zero, aren't really getting the fulfillment of that buff because they simply don't fit into the meta right now, where balancing isn't really doing much about it. Let's look at the Gridlock buff, for example, in this most recent season. They made it where her track stingers now grant the limping effect, which frost mats and razor blooms do, and they also made the track stingers stronger, so it requires more damage to destroy them. That's all fine, well and true, but it's not really changing anything from a match-to-match perspective. We're not really going to see the full effect of a buff for an operator like Gridlock when flank watching isn't really the issue which attackers are facing right now. And yes, as the meta will continue to shift, we will see more and more benefits of Gridlock's flank watching potential. And again, this isn't me saying that if you play Gridlock right now, you're not going to benefit from this flank watching buff that she has been given. But the thing is, this is not having a true effect on the meta. It doesn't matter how good your flank watching potential is when you have an over oppressive DMR on defense that destroys you from a pixel angle with absolutely no recoil and an unnecessary ACOG. Or a high fire rate SMG catching your head with a lucky recoil shot. And put on top of that a lot of utility as well. Which again, that stuff existing on defense isn't inherently a bad thing, more so talking about the utility here, but that means then we have to start leaning into the exact same operators every single time to deal with this. We have to lean into our Thatchers, we have to lean into our other utility clearing operators. And the more this begins to pile on, the less you are going to prioritize operators like Gridlock despite her buff. And as well as this, due to the meta on attack right now being very direct and very intel heavy, many of the time you actually get into a position to fully utilize these track stingers, you already have that sight control and the round is likely already over. And it's not to say that the track stingers aren't helping, because it of course makes a retake harder, but you don't have that same fulfillment of this operator as you're kind of wanting from these buffs. Same from a defender's perspective as well. It doesn't feel fulfilling buffing operators such as Scopos when every single round attackers are going to get half the map control within 20 seconds because Solid Snake has already cleared the area, and you're getting bombarded with a deimos track and a Dokkaebi call. I am not against buffing stuff in this game, but we are at such a disconnect in my opinion with this meta where there are stuff which is just blatantly strong, which doesn't have enough counters, and we're buffing operators that aren't really having an effect in stopping other operators like this, or even when they are buffed, it's not massively changing the outcome of the round. And I want to show you a bit of a disconnect I noticed myself. You have operators like Brava who are incredible at counting much of the utility on defense. However, because of operators such as Mute or Macie, it is so hard to get your Brava drone in key positions to actually utilize her gadget. But then, on the flip side, attackers have so many intel gathering operators such as Snake, Dokkaebi, Deimos, and there is now a disconnect here where mute jammers kind of struggle to keep them in line because, well, you're not always going to be near a mute jammer. There are ways that you can clear mute jammers with explosives, for example. And again, having counters to stuff is not a bad thing. There is no issue here. However, when you have a side of this equation which is clearly easier, being that intel operators, yes, get countered by mute, for example, but you can simply just overwhelm the amount of mute jammers there are and sort of not have to worry about it because you can be that oppressive. It can only hold you back so much. So we don't actually really need to bring that Brava, for example, because the mute jammers counter her too well. So we'll just disregard that part of the team and we'll focus on these operators, which can kind of just overwhelm the other side. Apply the same logic to pretty much every other role and operator in this game, and that's the issue I'm kind of talking about in this meta, is because we're not in a meta of countering, we're in a meta of overwhelming. And I do think there is a distinct, clear difference between that. And unfortunately, I do think, at least for the current meta right now, Mute does play a big part in that, because I'd say he's too effective at countering many of the droning operators, but he's not effective enough for countering many of the intel operators. So it sort of puts him in a weird position where do you make him stronger or do you make him weaker? But that's how I see many of the DMRs on defense as well. It doesn't feel like you're countering a push, rather it feels like, okay, well, how many oppressive weapons can we now bring on defense to hold a current angle and just simply overwhelm them? It does not matter how well you take control there. It doesn't matter which utility you use to get into that position. If they're tucked away enough and have such a long angle that you simply can't clear them out with gadgets alone, it feels more like, how quickly can we overwhelm them with these DMRs compared to how can we use our guns and gadgets in unison to push them back, create crossfires. And I want to emphasize this is an issue on both sides of this game right now. It doesn't feel like balancing has truly realized that we're in an overwhelming the enemy meta. And in my honest opinion, I think this has led to an actual TDM meta. I didn't think we had a TDM meta. One of the people who kept saying we have or have been having a TDM meta is Macie J. And listen, I respect Macie. People have it out for him. I played with him a bunch, met him in person a bunch. I think he's an absolutely lovely fella. I always disagreed with him though, and I gave my reason. I'm like, I don't think we're in a TDM meta, because I would see examples given, and to me, it wasn't a TDM meta. It was attackers successfully, utilizing a weakness in the defense, or defenders successfully noticing a gap in the attack and utilizing that. To me, that was just simple team play and utilizing an opening which your enemy has accidentally given you. I never saw that as a TDM meta. But right now, I feel like we are in a more TDM meta because we are in this state of how much can I just overwhelm this operator? And, how much can we just push them into a bad position where I can use a high fire rate weapon to then take them out? It doesn't feel fulfilling, at least for me as a Siege player. Even though gadgets are being involved here, it doesn't feel like a fulfillment. It doesn't feel like, it just doesn't feel like the rounds are ending up in fun places, because I'll watch and I'll even experience it myself of teams properly trying their hardest and being successful at clearing out positions, but then when it just comes down to it, they're dying to a DMR, they're dying to an SMG-12, they're being put in bad positions where they're being overwhelmed by a Dokkaebi and Solid Snake's gadget with a deimos track and something else in the middle. Yes, at the end of the day, that is still team play, and I can't deny that that isn't. That is still a form of team play. But I guess just me personally, I don't find it fun. And maybe that's what it comes down to. Maybe you enjoy that meta more than I do. But to me, I want fulfillment when I'm countering something. It doesn't mean if I counter the enemy, I then am entitled to win or beat them in that engagement. But I actually want to feel like even though I've earned that advantage and I lose it, that I still worked for that advantage and got it. Right now, I feel like you can work for an advantage in this game and be completely shut down without really much fulfillment from that other side. It doesn't feel like they earned that. And I guess that's where all of this is coming from. It doesn't feel like enemies in this meta are earning the fights they are given, or earning the positions they are taking. Stuff doesn't feel like it's being earned right now. And I said it already, but I think the best way of describing it is that we're just in a position of how much can we overwhelm the attack? How much can we overwhelm the defense? Use these same operators and overwhelm them. And well and true, people may be enjoying that, and it's cool to see operators like Scopos and Gridlock and Zero all get these buffs, but at the end of the day, they're not overwhelming the enemy. You are not overwhelming everyone. And that's why I feel like we're getting into a sort of risky position of, if we keep buffing everything, what side of the aisle are we going down? Are we going down the aisle where we just make every operator like this and you can just completely overwhelm your enemy with any operator you want? Or are we going to look at these heavy hitters and accept that, okay, these guys are maybe doing too much, we have to tone them down a little bit? And that doesn't mean that we can't keep buffing. It doesn't mean that we can't look at Gridlock and buff her. It doesn't mean that we can't look at Sense and buff them. It doesn't mean we can't even look at stronger operators like Buck and buff him. But as long as they're not put in positions like operators like Dokkaebi and Snake and Aruni and X, Y, and Z are all being put in because they've been given these leverages which put them ahead of their competition. But at the same time, you're not being given the tools to shut them down. I don't think that's really fun for anyone. I haven't really talked about shields right now. I mean, many people know I play shields a lot, but I do not deny that they are oppressive and they're such a strong thing. Like, not at all. We are getting a direct shield counter next season as a new defender, so I do at least feel like we are going to be given some tools in the hands of defenders to deal with shields. We've got impact nades. I actually do think we should get another secondary gadget on defense, similar to maybe like, I don't know, a slow acting air jab or something that can shield break an operator. Maybe like an electricity grenade where you throw it and it'll do like a clash slap and then push their shield back. I do feel like defense, even with a direct counter, will likely need another shield thing to deal with, rather than having this new operator be necessary to counter shields every single round. So yeah, that's my current view on the meta. I feel like balancing need to actually address the meta rather than buffing many of the operators who are outside the meta, because no matter what you do to those operators, they're not going to enter this meta. This meta has closed doors, and it doesn't matter how strong you make the people knocking the door on the outside, they're not going to be let in. So you have to do something about that. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below if you agree or disagree, but that's my 2 cents.